Welcome to Clean Titans. Today, we're diving into the crucial intersection of business and sustainability. We have with us Jasper Steinhausen, founder of Business with Impact and author of Making Sustainability Profitable. Jasper, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Likewise, we're delighted to have you. Your work focuses on helping manufacturing SMEs turn sustainability into a competitive edge. Could you tell us a bit about your business with impact and your core mission?
Yeah, sure. A couple of decades ago, I realized that the global narrative around sustainability is that this is a problem, it's a burden, it's costly, it's hard to connect with business. And very often, also people think this equals lowering standards or having to compromise. And it really boils down to a discussion who needs to pay. And that's not really a very fruitful starting point for onboarding anybody into this needed transition. But I also realized that this narrative entirely is wrong. It builds on false assumptions and perspectives, and it's a poor mindset around all of this. So I'm on a quest to change this and to turn sustainability into that superpower it can be, one that makes businesses more profitable, more fulfilling to run and work in, and that leaves a positive mark on the world.
Your book, Making Sustainability Profitable, is an international bestseller. What was the core message you wanted to convey through this book?
Well, one thing is that, as I said, most businesses go about this in the wrong way. And as I said, thinking that this is really more like a cost and a burden and a problem than a business opportunity. So one thing was to confront that narrative, and the other one was to create a as simple as I could or framework or method or whatever you want to call it that can guide business leaders into how do I move from where I am today into what I call the sweet spot, where you actually get to a place where business is thriving because of the way you work with sustainability, not just adding more costs to the balance sheet.
What are some of the biggest misconceptions businesses have about sustainability and profitability?
Well, about sustainability, I think where most, bless you, where most get it wrong really is that they start with creating some sort of sustainability strategy. So separating business and sustainability, whatever the label is, it could be climate, it could be ESG or whatever. That's not important for this conversation. But most businesses basically separate between the super important stuff that's in the core business strategy. That's perhaps where you have your agreement with the board. That's where your incentive structures. All of that is around ensuring those goals. And then you have sort of a range actually of lesser important strategies. And this is typically where sustainability stays. So it's really essential to know and understand that a range of the typical business problems that leaders are sitting with on their plate can actually be solved through, and you can find new ways to do that through looking at it from this more, you could call it resource flow perspective that comes with sustainability and with circular economy. So it's issues like cost reduction, it's customer loyalty, it's innovation, it's productivity, it's talent, keeping those you have, attracting more, it's more partnerships. Increasingly, this is also moving into areas like insurance and access to capital. These are some of the typical, and there's a few more, but anyway, these are some of the typical ones. And so if any of you listening to this think, oh, yeah, I recognize it, sure, this is on my plate. Well, then here are some additional set of tools to fix it. Most likely some that you have not tried before because it's a different standing, a different discipline that offers something that most leadership methods and frameworks do not offer.
You've helped over 100 companies embed sustainability into their operations.
Yes.
What are the first steps you typically recommend for businesses looking to integrate sustainability?
Well, it's really to connect it to the business, like I just said, right? It's this disconnect that's the main problem. So, to make it very practical, what I typically ask for very early in a conversation when I sit with a business leader is what is the 3 to 5 biggest existing business problems that you are facing, and what are the corresponding 3 to 5 biggest business problems that your ideal clients are facing. So I asked them to put those on the table. And then I guess part of my specialty is to easily be able to see, well, if you have this type of problem around, let's say, cost reductions is on so many people's plates right now, then what could you do? What kind of questions do we need to ask? Where do we need to be curious? Where do we need to look and so on? But also, what is it for your main clients? What are their focus? What do you do? Because the most important thing here is really, if you want big impact, you got to solve big existing business problems. That's the name of the game, because everything else, all the resources, all the mental bandwidth, the willingness to invest, all of that is allocated, of course, towards what's considered the top priority. So as long as sustainability is a second order priority, you will never really do a lot about it. But and again, as I said before, the very misfortunate thing is that people just don't realize that they can actually use it to reach some of the main targets that they have. So it's helping them see that and figure out, because obviously it's unique for every company. So what is your specific problem? Who's your ideal clients? What are they struggling with? And then I think this is one that we could work on. Would it be interesting if we could help fix some of those? Yes, of course it would. Well, now it would be interesting. Well, then let's have a look at it, right? Let's see what we could do. So it's really about helping them find the right pathway in for them where value becomes really easy to see and understand. Whereas today, most of the time, it's not, because it's sort of good for the world. And perhaps we can see a bit of marketing opportunity in it, but also afraid of using it. And well, especially as the political climate is in the US right now, where there's this big divide that you might have, if you already have a brand that's partly there, you might have a lot of loyal customers and fans that really actually would like you. At least I've had discussions with people in the US that says that you have a massive divide where about half the population becomes massively against it, perhaps also more than what they are, but just because of that political situation right now. And the other group that then, as a bit of protesting, actually increases their desire to support it. So you got to know where your customers are, if that's a smart idea right now in the US, perhaps, right? So it differs. And again, if you just see this as a branding window of opportunity, well, then it's very, very limited, but there's so much more it can do. So it's really about helping the actual company figure out, how do we do this in a way where it becomes super interesting for us and where we'd really love to succeed? Because then you get the business value and you get the impact value. So, as you say, it's business with impact. That's really what we need to do.
What are some of the most common challenges businesses face when starting their sustainability journey?
Well, that's a good question. I think one of the main problems really is that most of the senior business leaders, they don't really get it. They don't know how to lead this whole sustainability agenda. They don't know what it's all about. And really quite understandable why they don't, because it's never been part of their educational background. It's never been part of their direct portfolio of stuff they need to handle. So they never learned, and now it's clear that it is a strategic issue. You got to have it. It matters how you position yourself here. No matter where you choose to position, it matters where you are, and that's a strategic choice. And the volatility of raw material prices and energy and all of that means that much we use, it matters, right? So now it's clear, but just because it became clear that and evident that it is a strategic issue, it doesn't mean that you as a leader now knows how to handle it. Just because it was pushed onto your desk, doesn't mean that you are equipped to figure out how to do. And then perhaps you ask people in sustainability or a consultant or whatever you have. But the problem is with those girls are that nobody's ever taught them anything about business and strategy and leadership, right? So you have two groups of people here that are not capable of seeing that there is a clear bridge between them, and then they actually work on some of the same stuff, but nobody knows and nobody can translate, right? So that's the integration that I've been talking about that I was missing. And I guess that's kind of my specialty, really. That's where it kicks in. It is that I have one foot in business strategy leadership and the other one in sustainability, circular economy, climate, all of that, and can see and build that bridge and help people figure out what's the right way for you.
You use frameworks like your impact blueprint. Could you
Mhm.
explain this framework and how it helps businesses align their strategies with sustainability?
Sure. It's a pretty simple diagram, and when you look at it, so it has 5 different components to it. So the first one being mindset. We've already talked a bit about that this whole shift in mindset. There are one second. Let's just give it the bigger picture. So there are 5 steps. So it's mindset, it's mission, it's mapping out how you move towards this mission. It's movement. It's really about implementation and how you do that. And then the last one is going out and spreading the word about this. So it's the communication part. It's where you go out and spread the word, basically. So these are the 5 steps. And the mindset part, as I said in the beginning, it's really that global narrative we're up against. So we need a transformation and a paradigm shift, I guess you could say, in our understanding of this. So I identified 5 that I call the fatal 5, that are these general stumbling blocks or misconceptions, and then a corresponding set that I call 5 to thrive. So it's that shift that's really underneath it. And if you like, we can dive into the mindset part. That's up to you. And then for the mission part, it's really that businesses that really succeed today, and especially tomorrow's world, but already now, they have understood that it has to be about something that's more than yourself. You have to be part of serving and trying to solve some of those bigger problems that we have created for ourselves in this world. It could be anything, doesn't really matter much, as long as it's significant to a lot of people, because it means you connect instantly. So if you take any group of people and just took 1,000 people randomly chosen, and you help them all clarify their bigger why, their personal purpose, what it was all about. None of these would be about owning 5 planes or 2 houses or 5 cars or whatever. It's all relational to living things, people or animals or ecosystem, something, right? So it's all natural things and somehow. So the second that you find out which of these bigger problems for humanity or for animals or for ecosystem or whatever it is you choose, climate change, whatever, then instantly you have a proportion of any group of people that would like you to succeed, simply because you are trying to deal with something that themselves personally think is interesting. And then let's say you could produce office furniture. Well, even though they might not need that right now, they would like you to succeed anyway. And if they know anybody, say, hey, have a look at this company, right? Because they're doing amazing stuff. And then, of course, at the end of the day, your product needs to stand the test. And that's how it should be. You don't win on that. You might win the right to compete, but at the end of the day, it's the specific solution that has to be good enough. But that's one of the reasons why I call this a superpower. It is because it just puts you in a better place, and it also has impact on how the people working there, their level of pride of being part of something bigger. And when is the last time you heard about or experienced some sort of weather extreme? When was that, Ali? When's the last time you stumbled upon something where it's like, oh, this is weird. This is the hottest or coldest or wettest or driest or whatever. When's the last time?
I think the hurricane that hit the United States
Right?
last year.
Yeah, basically, if you go to any news platform, you could find a story about it somewhere, right? So people hear about it all the time, and it
Oh,
becomes more and more clear that it's changing, and it's not in. It becomes less stable and becomes horrifying, right?
yeah, yeah,
Wildfires and hurricanes
yeah.
and all of that. So
The,
you want to do something, you want to act, or you feel that somebody should do something, right? So if your company becomes part of that somebody, well, then that gives you a lot of credibility and a lot of people that want you to succeed, right? So that's really all about the mission part, finding out what's the right mission for you. And the where it becomes interesting is where you have the overlap between what you're good at and what suits your business really well. So I guess you could look at the parts from a SWOT analysis or something like that to give you an idea about where are we at. And then the purpose, what's the higher purpose, what's the desire, what would you like to spend your energy on as the leader, the owner, the leadership team, depending on the size of company. But anyway, so we have mindset first, and we have the mission. Mapping out is different tools to mapping out how could we move towards this. And in there is this crucial part that I talked about in the beginning. Say you brainstorm through using circular economy or whatever it is, you can use different frameworks and tools for that. You get 50 ideas for what you could do. And then you use these top 5 business problems that you have and your clients have as a filter, and basically put all the ideas through the filter and see what comes out on the other end, right? And all of those are inherently valuable to the business because they'll be contributing to solving some of your business problems, the biggest ones, or your clients' biggest problems. So obviously they're inherently valuable. And because they're discovered through that sort of lens of sustainability, they will also have an impact on the world. So that's really step 3, is mapping out the right kind of initiatives. And then, as I said, 4, movement. How do we implement all of this? Well, if you've done step 3 correctly, then this becomes not necessarily easier to do, because this is basically just business development and innovation. And it's as hard as it's always been, but it's also something that every business leader is used to working with, right? It's part of what it's like to run a business. You need to do development of your company, so everybody knows this area, and they also know it's hard work, but they know how to do it, basically. And the last one is going out and communicating about this. So those are the 5 steps that you need to sort of cover, with the first 3 one being what I call the learning phase, and the last 2 one being the earning phase. This is where you cash in. This is where it becomes interesting. This is where the money lies.
How do you ensure these frameworks are practical and lead to measurable results for businesses?
Well, very much by connecting it to their context, right? Sustainability is context specific. So, especially again, as I said, because I connected to the business problem that they're at. So, making it practical is that if you struggle with getting into this new market, or your customer feels like it's the biggest problem is really that they would desire far more customizable solution of your product, or that it was easier to maintain, or let it live longer, or whatever it is, we can say, well, we go from sustainability, big fluffy term, to, well, here are 3 things we could see we could do that would increase the lifespan of the product, which is what our customers has as the biggest desire, and thus will find the product more valuable. Or perhaps we will add a service on top that we can also cash in on, generate a new cash flow for in our business on the back of products we already made. Well, and it becomes very tangible, it becomes concrete and specific. So it's really about, again, the more we directly tie it into a business problem, the more tangible it becomes and valuable.
You focus on manufacturing SMEs. Why
Mhm.
is this sector particularly important for driving sustainability, and what unique opportunities and challenges do they face?
Well, if you ask yourself that, produces all this stuff around you, right? Who
Manu-
does exactly? Everything we have around us is created somewhere, and these are the companies, right? So they have most direct opportunity to change what's put in the marketplace. So rather than asking consumers, and it's their responsibility, and your money where your mouth is, and all of that, leaving up to consumers' choice, I would say far better to adjust at the root of all of this. And this is also where the opportunities lies to do things smarter, because this is really, again, as I said, it's about creating new and better solution versions of your product. It's not a green thing. It's not a save the world thing. It's use this to make smarter products and beat your competitors. So that's why I look at manufacturing, and why SMEs. It's because it's the vast majority of all companies we have on the planet. They are SMEs, and most of them don't have the time and the resources to figure this out. So they massively need help, and that's also why I give away so much stuff that I do, is to hopefully inspire people and give people an idea about what I could do if you don't have an entire department. You can look into this and find a way. So I say all my tools are equally usable and valuable for a large corporation, and I've also worked with large companies on this. But the reason why I focus on the SMEs is because there's just so many of them, and they struggle, and they shouldn't.
Can you share a specific example of how you've helped the manufacturing SME turn sustainability into a competitive advantage?
Sure. Well, why don't we take a company I worked with a few years ago? Because then it's capable of seeing what have happened here. It's probably, I don't know, perhaps it's 5 years ago or something. This is a small company in Sweden called Arcus, or actually got a new name because they recently been acquired, which is also part of the success story here. But anyway, it's a sign company. So they create signs like you see if you walk around in the city. And so both sort of illuminated ones and regular signs, every type of sign that you can imagine, but really sign focused as well. So I guess you could call it a bit higher end. So for those who care about this. And when I came in, what we did was, well, actually, we started by tidying up their portfolio because they were not really having a great business. They were struggling quite a lot. And as part of me sort of asking around and understanding the business, it became clear that they were actually struggling a bit. So we started up by cleaning it up a bit, but that was aligned also with where they wanted to go. So more clarity around who's the ideal client really for this, and the mission that I talked about before. We updated their vision and mission for why were we here and all together, right? And what's a new type of messaging came here. So those steps went hand in hand. So new mission that was also tailored to these ideal clients that they wanted to work with, and new messaging around it, and cleaning up the portfolio and taking out and well, you could say luckily, but I actually find that it's not luck. It's more often the case that if you have a part of your portfolio that's not really super profitable, or even worse sometimes, it doesn't really tie up to your ideal client, because your ideal clients, typically you offer them something that they're high value and they're ready to pay for it. So that's where you make your money. So we took out the poor part of the business by focusing on those who matched the new vision and that they wanted to work with, and got the messaging clear around that, changed how a bit on their sales process, and then from there on they started working and improving their products, creating new designs, all of that. And since then, won several awards. And I've been checking in. It's kind of like, yeah, we just broke the best quarter again. And then recently, as I said, they were acquired by a larger competitor in the space, but not. Well, I would say it's a merger and acquisition. It's not a hostile takeover, but it was like, hey, we should join forces. But and got a very, I think they would say, a very interesting purchasing price, really significantly bumped up over the last couple of years because the position is so much better than what it was before.
So, success story.
Yeah.
You've been at the forefront of sustainable business development and circular economy for over 15 years. How has the landscape of sustainable business changed during this time?
Well, I like to look at that question like a maturity curves, right? Which I find is interesting because you can then also use them at the specific marketplaces, the countries, the regions you're in. And I'm based in Denmark. So if you look at Denmark, Scandinavia, Northern Europe, you can say, well, what? Because there tends to be like maturity curve. They kind of sometimes draw them as waves, right? And at certain point, reach a breaking point in that wave where it becomes just a normal part of the equation. So if you look at it in here, and I think most of the world is kind of like climate change has been the wave that over here at least broke, I don't know, 10, at least 10 years ago, 15 years ago, perhaps. And it was not something that you needed to explain. But I've been part of the entire wave around circular economy because it practically didn't exist when I discovered it in Denmark, and has been part of that and about countless presentations on this. That was really about what is all of this. We've heard this frame, right? And then it moves into now I think I get the idea, but I have to be more practical. How can I do it? And then the first companies start to do something, and then it becomes more and more mainstream, and it finds its way into legislation and all of that. So very often you get this curve, and the next wave, what we see is, is biodiversity is very early in its wave, but that's, picking up speed, that people realize that, oh, we got to do a lot of things different here. Otherwise, we're going to lose a lot of the systems that are creating the stability for our lives and the foundation for a lot of stuff that we really need, apart from the whole, more, I guess you could say, ethical part about, well, is it okay for us to just eliminate other species at the rate that we're doing? But apart from that, people are starting to realize that there's actually a severe backdraft to doing that, because the systems and balances are there, and it hits us severely when we cross these boundaries. So I think it's really, you can look at it through these curves. And if I were a listener here and thinking, well, where are we? I would try to plot that on a scale from kind of early day. People, most don't know what it is. Asking questions more like, is this, or is it next, slightly later in that curve, on that way? Well, I think I now know the term, but if you ask me what it is, I don't really get it. then people start to get it, and the first ones are starting to experiment. Do we start to see a lot? You can get like bell curve as well for adoption of new technologies, right? Most will probably know that. So where are you in that landscape? And that depends on also how to communicate this, what you can expect, how many people will know, how many of your employees will know, that. So it kind of helps you define, where do I start on this, and how much either headwind or tailwind can I expect when I'm working with this.
What are the biggest trends you're seeing in the circular economy that businesses should be aware of?
Well, I'm not really sure what to say about that because you probably know by now, I guess you could say not super theoretical approach to this. So there's a lot of discussions going on, sort of the community of circular economy. And I spend more time in the community of business. So I think it's more interesting to see what are some of the major trends in business right now where I know for certain that circular economy can help. And I would say that right now in the world, with all the turbulence going on, there is a lot of companies thinking about what's the cost structure we have right now. Could we do anything to lower our costs? Perhaps we're exporting stuff to countries and all of a sudden there are taxes on it, or we're seeing increases or massive volatility in raw materials, or increased competition, or economy is taking a hit. So, can people pay what it is? Can I lower my cost and thereby perhaps offer better prices, or live with selling less and still have a profitable business, and so on? So that whole cost base is something that clearly is and will be in the coming months and quarters, and well, who knows for how long, a massive issue. And that's especially for manufacturing and also service-based businesses that rely on a lot of equipment to deliver the service. So not sort of poor knowledge companies like consultants and accountants and stuff like that, but let's say you can say a transportation company is a service company, but you need quite a lot of equipment to be able to deliver the service and so on, right? So everybody who has a lot of a massive resource flow tied to their business, they could benefit from this. So I think we'll see an increase in that use. We saw that the energy prices exploded a couple of years ago when the Ukraine war and Russia war started. You could see a massive, especially here in Europe, a massive increase in gas and electricity prices. And instantly, we're flocking to this, not calling it circular economy, but just like, I freaking need to do something because I just lost my entire profit base on the fact that my energy is now 4 times higher than it was 3 weeks ago. We need to do something, guys, right? So I think that's probably where I would expect the most of the focus is going to be in a sort of fairly short period of time. And there's
Yeah.
lots that can be done. When I step into a company or look at it, I basically see it bleeding money all over the place. So if you're tired of losing money, there's a lot of leaking you can start doing.
Yeah, and save a lot of money with by sustainable practices.
Yes,
Cost
indeed.
savings.
Yes, quite a lot. Yeah.
Can businesses leverage the principles of the circular economy to reduce their environmental impact while creating new business value?
Well, again, there are many different ways, but it really also boils down to the specific context, like we talked about earlier on today, right? That the problems you're trying to solve, right? Because obviously it differs if it's, well, I'm really, have an innovation game going on up against my competitors. So how can I stimulate innovation in new ways? Well, that's one way you can use it, and then there's one set of approaches that will be relevant there. If it's cutting costs, like we just talked about, it's differently. If it's increasing productivity or attracting talent, it's a different game. And so I wouldn't, there's not kind of this is how you do, because it depends on what you want out of it. So again, I like to think of this as a toolbox, and there are several different tools in it. So if you just pick up a hammer and say, what can I use it for? Or if you just say, what can I use this toolbox for? It depends a lot, because there's a hammer and a screwdriver and a syringe. And what do you want? What are you trying to fix? Right. So I would say it boils down to, when take to heart that this can be used to solve some of the problems that I've been talking about, like cost reduction, like innovation, like productivity, like customer loyalty, like attracting talent. The things also that I mentioned in the beginning. Right? So if you take that to heart, that this is a toolbox that can do that, and you feel like, yeah, one and this one, that's me. Well, then you can dive into it and see how could we do that? What are the things and practical steps we can take? So I know it's not really an answer to your question, but hopefully it makes sense still.
So, what are some of the practical steps businesses can take to implement circular economy strategies?
Well, I think again, back to the previous answer, I would say start by writing down who's my ideal client and what's the 3 to 5 biggest problems they have. Right. And sometimes, actually, scarily enough, when I ask clients, sometimes it's kind of like, we don't know exactly. Right? So I've learned over the years that there is a bit, people are a bit scared, actually, to engage with their customers and understand and ask questions, right? Because this kind of a bit like a holy thing. You cannot touch them. We cannot ask them stuff because what would they think? I find the opposite is actually the truth, that the more a supplier asks you to really try to understand what's important for you, the more valuable they will find that you are, because they signals that you actually care. So anyway, so write those down and write your business challenges down. And that's where, if you've never done it before, it's obviously this is the tricky part, but that's what I do when I'm with companies and say, okay, well, if these are the 10 problems, some of them will probably be overlapping. One of these could we use circular economy to help do? And from there on, it starts. But let's just say that you are, again, looking at reducing cost, like I said before. Then I can give you a really simple framework, if you would like that, for what you could do. So look at your, is that okay? Dive into a simple way of doing that.
Sure.
Yeah, imagine you're here as a listener sitting saying, well, yeah, I have a manufacturing company and I would like to do something. And it's important for me to see where I can cut costs. Okay, make it really simple. Use the 80/20 approach and say, what's the 20% of our products that are generating 80% of our turnover? Okay, so it's these 5 products of whatever it is. Great. And you can even go further down, narrow it even further down if you like, to make it even more simple, but still do that and say, okay, let's look at it. On these, what are the 20% of the components or raw materials that is needed to create this? Again, if you are back in the office furniture, like we talked about before, say it's the desk that you're sitting by, well, what are those? And it typically boils down to fairly few materials at the end of the day. Obviously, if you're producing a computer or something, there are so many different components, but for most companies, it's actually not that. There might be many, but not that make up the majority of it. And you would look at that both in terms of a volume and a cost perspective, right? So you have the 20% in terms of volume and cost that it takes to make up the product. And then you ask yourself, how much of these materials or components, if you buy components and put together, how many of these do we buy? And again, we need a weight and a dollar amount to these two. And then you look at and say, well, how many of the products do we sell? So let's just say, for instance, to make it super simple, that you sell 100 products. Last year, you sold 100 products of these. And it takes 10 kilograms of material that goes into every product that you sell, right? Just to make it simple. And then you look at it and say, well, we actually bought 15 kilo times the 100 product that we sold. So 1,500 kilos. So basically means that 50% of all the raw materials that we bought didn't end up in a product that we managed to sell. So that means it's waste. So you wasted 50% of all the raw materials you bought. They never ended up as something you could sell. And there could be many reasons why you can't sell it. Perhaps you produced a product and didn't sell it. Perhaps there was an error or failure somewhere. Some of it is something that, let's just say that again, you make round tables and you get your wooden top of desks as a square. So obviously there's something you cannot avoid, but there's a lot you can. And even the ones you cannot avoid, how could you utilize that for something else? So you can basically mean quite easily, you get through this small exercise, you get a number that you're tracking. And if that number is big and valuable, well, then basically double click on it, right? Figure out what happens. If we're trying to, you can draw up on a wall, what's the entire process from material coming in the door to finished product leaving, going out to a customer? What are all the steps? And where is it that we are seeing this? Where does the leak, right? As I said before, I see bleeding money all over. Where is it bleeding? okay, something here, and then start asking. And please involve, it's really super important, those who are manning these stations, because they're the ones who know, right? So what's going on here? Why is that the case? Why do we waste so much? Is there any way, do you have any ideas what we could do differently? And for all the stuff we cannot avoid, well, then ask yourself, what would it take for this to be a valuable resource for somebody else? What would it take, and for whom? How could we do that? Such a simple exercise will mean that you will start to be able to circle in a few hotspots in your manufacturing process where majority of the cost that you right now have to buy, and you put, worst case, actually pay somebody to take off your hand as waste, right? So it's double painfully, right? So I pay for good materials, and I pay somebody to take them away after I paid people to process this and have, some of it. So that could be a really simple framework on getting started if it's about reducing costs and reducing the unintended or just never thought about waste.
You emphasize solving meaningful problems for customers to create business value while reducing environmental impact. Could you
Mhm.
elaborate on this approach?
Well, it's the best way, whether or not you want to work on this to improve your the impact on the world you have, right? If you want to, whether you're not just sort of from a I want to change the world type of perspective, or I want to improve my business, it doesn't really matter. The best way you can move ahead is to use this as a way to creating these new and better solutions. So the thing is that most people that are in management, what they have been taught and the equipment they got, the guidelines, the tools, the theories, all of that, they very much tend to focus on two things. So they look at the flow of money and the flow of people, time, right? So we want to get as much throughput of the processes per hour as we possibly can, because we need to pay the people that are here, right? But what they are not doing, and what circular economy especially, but sustainability in general, but especially circular economy comes with that, they look at the resource flow. So there are these three things that are, when you look at a manufacturing company, there is the resource flow, there is the people flow, the flow through per hour per person, and there is the monetary flow. And most businesses today are only looking at two of them at leadership level. And that's why there's so much to gain, because there's this entire stream and way of looking at it that is not utilized today. So that's really what it's all about, right? You got to find these ways to do that. And that will improve your business, and it will improve your impact. And by tying these together and up to towards the biggest problems you already have, as I said several times here, that's where the will to implement, the will to scale, the ability to do it, and the bandwidth, the money, the resources, the people, everything, it's all there already.
What role does leadership play in driving sustainability within an organization?
That's essential, absolutely essential. It's the only ones who can really set the direction. What's the overall course here? We talked about the mission, right? But also tying it to the business goal, changes to strategy. They need to lead it, they need to own it, and they also need to guard it, right? Because, as I said, this is innovation and this is business development, and it's seen so many times, and you can find this all the way through innovation literature as well, that so many examples of small innovative new ways of doing are basically getting strangled by what some call the corporate immune system. Because when you come up with a new and smarter way of doing something, then the people that used to be, that are in charge of the current best way of doing it, they will feel threatened, right? Because I used to be the king of my small kingdom here. I used to be the most important person here. I was the person who knew, or I had the decision power, or I had the budget, or whatever it is. And now somebody comes with a new and smarter, so it threatens my domain. And right now, I'm still calling shots because I have the right way of doing. So if I strangle this, well, it's just a tiny little If you look at it like a plant, well, it's still a small one, a tree, super simple. While as years later, when the oak is huge and big, it's not that easy to just rip it up, right? So that's what happens as well. So they also need to guard it a bit, and they also need to promote it, and of course, need to ensure that the necessary competences and the mindset that we've been talking a bit about as well, and budget and all of that. So there are mutual roles, mutual hats to wear that needs to sit on the top senior leadership. Not necessarily all of them on the CEO, but it's a lot of this is C-suite, and then trickling down through the organization.
What are the key leadership qualities needed to champion sustainability initiatives effectively?
Well, actually, they're quite similar traits to good leadership as we know it today, right? So, luckily, more and more people and companies are realizing that the sort of old-fashioned dominant leader is not a really smart way of doing it, right? We know today that good leadership, it's the understanding, it's people focused, it's purpose driven, it's caring, it's strategic, it's delegating, it's really about getting the most out of the team. It's not the old sort of military structured, fear-based type of approach that's been the way of describing leadership for, I don't know, since 1920s or whatever, and perhaps up until 80s, 90s, something like that. But we know now clearly that the most successful business leaders and companies are those where leaders have a very different leadership style that are far more sort of and engaging, and it's really about activating all the resources and the best of the people. And the story about quiet quitting and all of that. Why do you think that happens? Well, if you feel like you're not valued, you're not part of the game, it's not purpose driven, it's not important, it's not meaningful what I'm doing, then it's a lot easier to feel like I'll just lean back. And if they in the marketplace, when they meet the perhaps smaller but more committed, more engaged leadership at a team, they always win, right? The committed and engaged, and decisions is delegated closer to it so they can react faster, and all of that, right? So it's basically all the traits of modern leadership. You need this as well, and you need it even more perhaps, but it also it fits really well with it. So I guess if you have that old-fashioned leadership style still, you might find that this is challenging for you. But you will also find that if you start looking at these two together, it will radically change your business and where you are at and how successful you are and how valuable the business is altogether as well.
You offer resources like your Outside Perspective video newsletter and
Mhm.
Impact Tomorrow newsletter. Why is it important for businesses to stay informed about sustainability trends and actionable insights?
Well, I think by now, this far into the interview, I think most people will have an idea that this is a different way. I need to understand some of this. The problem is, as I said in the beginning, the global narrative is still out there, is still dominant, and it's still around this whole problem focus, pain, that it's hard, it's costly, it's lower quality, all of that. So, what I'm trying to do with all of this is to shift people's perspective. It's to offer specific solutions. It's to give perspectives on new opportunities and create hope that it's possible and doable. And also, I think the fifth and final column sometimes is also signaling and making sure people understand how severe the situation we're in. So that's why I sort of put it out there. And not a matter of if you would like to work with sustainability or not. It's not going away. Unfortunately, it's just gets more and more severe. And if we don't decide to change, then you'll be forced to change either by a client or by regulation or simply by the fact that there's going to be so much destruction to your supply chain. You mentioned hurricanes and stuff like that, that it's going to be so bad for your business. So at some point, you will have to start thinking differently. So the train is in motion, it's left. So if you're not on it, you definitely need to get on it fast. And that's where inspiration, suggestions to how you could do examples, all of those things that can lower the perceived risk and make people see where they can start. It fits in, and that's also why I'm really happy to join conversations like this one with you today, because we need to reach a ton of people. Because there's so many people where we need to make that shift in understanding. But if we do that, and for every new people I reach, and somebody that starts to think differently, we're seeing opportunities of businesses doing better and of changes to the world.
Yeah, there was a recent report that $1.5 trillion of property value is going to evaporate because of climate change. So
Yep.
that's significant. And in some insurers group recently said a whole sectors of insurance business might
Yep. It's not
disappear
you
because
don't have an insurable business, sorry, right?
right,
Or if
right.
you want to have insurance with us, well, we just tripled what it's going to cost you. And it's definitely starting with property, as you say. You are in that area in California that was so severely hit by the wildfires. What do you think people sitting there in the insurance broker? What do you think they are? What does the calculation say, right? When they okay, see, so and what's your postal code? It's like okay, don't do it. Money out of our window. They will kill our business, right? And the same goes if you're anywhere too close to the sea, or if you're in areas where we've been draining and now we build and houses are there and areas get flooded when massive rainfall and all of that. There's so many areas where it's like it's insane to insure that part. It's suicide for the insurance company. So you're definitely going to pay. And the same goes for raw materials, right? Say you have certain types of materials that might be legal, but will the world continue to accept it? Are lawsuits in the way, or are the market just starting to reject you? Well, if I lend you money, or if I'm to insure you and cover that risk, or if I'm going to lend you money, will you be able to pay them back? Let's just say I lend you money that you have a 10-year payback period on. If you're not changing, will you still have a super successful business in 5, 6, 7 years? Can you actually maintain the debt towards me, or are you a stranded asset? So this is no small thing. And if you don't get on it, you will be forced on it or thrown off.
What are some key resources or organizations you recommend for businesses looking to deepen their understanding of sustainability?
Well, obviously, I'm super biased here. So, because one is my book, Making Sustainability Profitable, that you mentioned, because that is really, I've written it as a do it yourself recipe. And by the way, I'll be happy to gift a copy to your listeners if you like. There is a download link I can give you that you can share if that's okay with you. So I'll be happy to do that. But also, I would say if it's not crystal clear the seriousness of this, I would try to understand that. A starting place could be to look into what's called the planetary boundaries. There are some really clear reports on it. There's even a Netflix documentary made about it. So you can do that from your couch if you want to make it super simple. And if you are already in, say you're not a C-suite, but a sustainability manager, whatever you call yourself, I would say start to understand the business side of things, right? Because it's this connection, the bridge that I've been talking about so many times. The better you are doing that, the more you can do. So it's a bit on where you are, where I would start, but I would definitely recommend that you do something on that mindset part. I think that's my book or some of the videos I've made on this. That would probably be a really smart way to start. At least I get a lot of positive feedback on it. So hopefully you will find that as well.
How do you see the role of sustainable business practices in accelerating the clean energy transition?
Well, that's a good question. There are a couple of different ones, I would say, because one thing is that obviously there is the whole entire green energy part, and that's just the technology race going on. And today, far the cheapest kilowatt hour you can produce if you're starting from scratch today is renewable. So again, the fossil era is coming to an end. Even though right now we are seeing different places in the world, the political regimes that really want to keep it alive, but one way or the other, it's going down simply because it's expensive, and the consequences of having them is just so severe. So I think the energy part is from the actual energy manufacturing and delivering that part. I think that will basically the market is taking care of that because innovation has just been going on so far that it's just not you spend your money in a more risky lower return technology, right? So they're losing that technology race, but there's far more to it, right? Because I remember a couple of years ago I worked with for a brief period of time I worked with Ørsted, which is one of the world's biggest windmill manufacturers and producers. And at that point, they were we were challenging a bit. Well, one thing, and they were working on, is that we basically is a clean tech company. We are part of the solution. We're making all these windmills, but how about the way we make the mills, right? How about the wings and what they're made of? What do we do? There are thousands and thousands of windmills that have been put up that are coming to the end of their life cycle, right? So very soon, it's already sort of starting, but soon we'll see a rapid increase in the number of mills that are at to be dismantled and taken down, and then something else comes up that are far more powerful instead. All of these wings, they are super problematic from a material and environmental point of view because they are such a mixture of materials. A lot of work is going into making them differently today, so that because they now have the end in mind, they didn't at that point. But so the whole manufacturing process of it, you can also look at solar cells or batteries and stuff. Is it that we are getting the critical raw materials that we use for it? Well, there's a lot of mining going on here, and then that is not really decent. But we're still doing it. This whole look around how do we produce all of the stuff that we do, and your whole recycling part, because there's so much out there. It cannot be a one-way street, like the society, like a river, right? It just flows one way. And if you throw a stick in, it will drift downstream. But, rather than mining might be far better, right? So how do we become better at extracting all the materials we need from something that's already been out there once and is now discarded because it's not effective enough anymore or whatever, right? So batteries and solar panels, right? So lots to do, definitely.
The technology keeps improving, so there are companies that are claiming to do almost 99% recycling of solar panels, batteries.
Yeah.
So technology keeps getting better.
Yes,
You
exactly
can't
right.
you you can't fight that, right? At some
No,
point, it just takes
no.
over.
Yeah.
What are some of the most exciting opportunities for businesses to contribute to a cleaner energy future?
Well, for everybody to do that, right? Because you talked about this is a technology race, and if it's not your game, well, you can look at it from a customer point of view, being a company that can decide to buy solar cells or whatever, if that's meaningful for you, and if it fits again back to what your problem structure is. So I would not say, buy windmills or solar cells or panels or whatever it is, if it's not part of the problems you're struggling with, right? Because that will mean again that we're just creating an additional problem for ourselves to work on and an additional cost center to direct money to, right? So I would definitely don't just do that because it's there. You need to figure out where it fits in with you, and if you are a high consumer, well, then obviously it also has a massive impact on your cost structure and thereby would probably be relevant. But anyway, so of course, there is some thinking there about making sure why you do it. And then there's still so much, and we also talked about this before, like we dive into the practices of how it's done and to the recycling part and reuse and prolonging, extending, repurposing, all of that. So there's lots of business opportunities there as well, because we're only just getting started. You mentioned that some claim that they are almost capable of reusing all of it, but there is still lots that don't. So big untapped market. So I think there are many ways where companies can get involved, but again, depends on what your specialty is, where you are, what your setup is, where you belong in the value chain, if you're a high consumer of energy or not, if you're part of the manufacturing of it, or what your role are up against the end market, and so many variables that needs to be taken in. And again, because this is business, we need to make sure that we do it the right way. And there's no one size fits all.
Yeah, there's a lot of energy wasted in businesses that can be channeled and put to better uses.
Yeah.
What are the biggest policy changes or market shifts that could further incentivize businesses to adapt sustainable practices?
Hmm. Well, that's a good question. And it's an interesting one in early April 25, where right now the pendulum swings the opposite direction in many parts of the world than through regulation or do lesser of it. But I would say every aspect of promoting reusable content, again, you can, whether it's in the built environment or, so that. And then in Europe for many years, we've had a principle of the polluters pay. I don't know if it's the same in North America, but so there are so many subsidies going into curing methods and products and energy manufacturing and productions that are contributing to climate and sustainability crisis and all of that. Some say that windmills without the subsidies of oil and gas, it's so much bigger. So you phase out, don't that makes the planet harder to live on. It's really that simple. So if everything that starts to phase out that, and I guess you could say level the playing field. So when there's a lot of legislation that favors what the current big businesses manufacture and put into market in your own in every country, right? We have the same in Denmark, of course. So if you are challenging the status quo with a new and smarter and better, greener, whatever you want to call it, solution, it might also be that there's legislative frameworks that make it harder to get in. If you discover any of those, it's in the playing field so that they actually have a chance to come in and compete. And it will be a matter of, well, what's the better solution? Well, then that one win, not a matter of one is protected and supported in different ways through legislation. That makes sense that it's there, right? So it's not like, well, why, how could you possibly do? Well, it was our big companies, we wanted to help it and it was a good solution, but now there's a better one. So then we need to make sure that at least it can compete on fair and equal terms, right?
How can businesses advocate for these changes and contribute to creating a more supportive ecosystem for sustainability?
Well, obviously, it differs a lot from country to country. So, what kind of government do you have? What's supportive or not? But very often, I would say one of the biggest things when I sometimes get engaged in discussing this at a more political level or training public entities where government, municipalities and stuff like that, working with those, right? And so how do I translate from sustainability into something that's important for the constituency and the voter base that they have and the programs and the principles that they're fighting for? I think if as a general answer to the question, I would say it's really about translating. Page two of any communication book, right? If you want to reach anybody with any type of message, you got to make sure you understand where they are and make this message come across in a language they understand and that makes sense to them. So it's basically that simple. If you get to page two in a communication marketing book, just do that.
For business owners and leaders who are looking to make sustainability a core part of their strategy, what key piece of advice would you give them?
Well, understand that it's part of and perhaps the biggest business opportunity of our time, and at least by far the biggest need that our generation take care of. Um, and then just get started, because like everything else, practice makes perfect. So you cannot. It's a matter of reading a ton of books and thinking and doing all kinds of stuff. It's about doing. So a bit more of an entrepreneurial approach, right? You got to do and able to learn more than you got to learn a lot to be able to do something. Because the only thing we don't have is time, right? We have the money, we have the knowledge, we have the resources to most of it. The only thing we don't have is time. So get started.
How can they connect with you and Business with Impact to learn more?
Well, obviously, you can find me on LinkedIn, Jasper Steinhausen, but I make it really simple. So if you want, you can go into my website at bwimpact.com/more impact. Because in there a few gifts that I put together for your audience. So that'll be really, really simple. There's also all contact details and how to find me on LinkedIn and all the places where I keep sharing stuff all the time.
We'll include a link to that in the description for this video.
Perfect.
Jasper, this has been an incredibly valuable conversation, providing practical insights to how businesses can thrive while contributing to a sustainable future. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us.
Well, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, Ali. Thank you for having me.
And to our viewers, thank you for joining us on Clean Titans. Please subscribe and follow us for more insights into the world of clean energy and sustainable business. Until next time, stay energized and keep making impact. And if you have questions, please ask them in comments and we'll get you answers to them. Thank you.